Order, please. Before we begin the day routine, the subject for this evening's light debate was submitted by the Honourable Member for Annapolis. Therefore, be resolved, the members of this House demand the Premier act immediately to fix the health care crisis that he finally admitted existed last night. Be debated this evening at 6 p.m. Begin the day routine presenting and reading petitions. The honourable member for Kings West.
Petition signed by Nova Scotians, 120, concerned about the high and ever-rising costs of post-secondary tuition. Mr. Speaker, I affix my signature thereof.
It's tabled. The honourable member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also have a petition signed by many Nova Scotians concerned about the high and ever-rising cost of tuition and calling for the government to take progressive reductions of tuition fees in the public post-secondary institutions. And I have affixed my signature to that as well. Thank you.
Petition is tabled. Presenting reports of committees. Tabling reports, regulations, and other papers. The Honourable Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to table the surplus Crown property disposal report.
Report is tabled. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to table the Nova Scotia Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, the 2004 annual report of the Nova Scotia Department of Justice.
Report is tabled. Request to revert back to petitions. Is it agreed? Reading of petitions. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg leave to table petition, the operative clause, which reads, therefore, your petitioners call upon the Legislative Assembly of Nova Scotia to make a considerable reinvestment in core funding to Nova Scotia's post-secondary institutions. Mr. Speaker, this contains the signatures of 569 post-secondary students from around the province, and I am affixing my signature. Thank you.
Thank you. The petition is tabled. Statements by ministers. The Honourable Minister of Tourism, Culture and Heritage.
Immigration.
And Immigration.
Mr. Speaker, I have great news to share today that I know will interest all members of this House. This morning at Pier 21, the College of Physicians and Surgeons released details of what is called CAP, their Clinician Assessment of Practice program. As a result of CAP, qualified, internationally trained family doctors will have their skills assessed without unnecessary delay. The written and practical exams are rigorous because we have very high medical standards here in Nova Scotia. In line with these standards, the doctors who are approved to go into practice are under the supervision of a mentor for a year, and reports on their work continue to be reviewed by the College of Physicians and Surgeons. But unlike most, if not all other provinces, doctors don't have to repeat training they already have. If they can show that they are qualified to practice, they will be available to see patients without delay. Nova Scotia is leading the country in this regard. Hear, hear. My colleague, the Minister of Health, was also at this morning's announcement and deserves praise for he and his department's commitment to this. He talked about this program and how it will help bring doctors to more communities, particularly in rural areas. As Immigration Minister, I am excited about this program and it supports our retention goals for immigrants. Mentors will help integrate the doctors and their families into their communities. As well, the province is negotiating incentives into these doctors' contracts to encourage international doctors to stay. While this is a big step, it is just the first step on a long road. We look forward to supporting our other health professionals who want to tailor this program to their needs, and we know the needs go well beyond health care. This year, our new Immigration Office will work with other professional associations, education and training institutions, industry, labour, employers, MISA, and other settlement agencies. We plan to bring our partners together by the fall. The goal is clear. We must identify the obstacles in assessing credentials of immigrants and develop an action plan to remove those obstacles. I want to congratulate the College of Physicians and Surgeons, for we will only succeed with the leadership and cooperation of professional associations and other partners. The college has set an excellent example. MISA should also be acknowledged. Not only have they been at the table for the CAPP discussions, but they have helped doctors prepare to succeed in the assessment. I want to congratulate Dr. Robert Maudsley, CAP's Executive Director, who received a round of applause when he presented the program to stakeholders this morning. He also told stakeholders that CAP is gaining attention around the world. Just this month, it was presented in Italy, and the Australians are particularly interested. Nova Scotia is not just leading the country with this program, we are attracting attention around the world. Mr. Speaker, today we all have a lot to celebrate. I also assure all members of this House that we know the work cannot stop. We have to build on this success, and that is my commitment. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Recognize the honourable member for Cole Harbour Eastern Passage.
Well, Mr. Speaker, as far as this announcement goes, I want to say that this is a good story for Nova Scotia, and we have to recognize the efforts of MISA and of the College of Physicians and Surgeons in this province. They have done a wonderful job over the last year or two recognizing a problem and addressing it through this CAP program. I know specifically I've talked to Jan Shepherd-Kucher from MISA about this recently. She provided me with some details. I think it is a good program that will encourage more doctors, IMGs as they're called, international medical graduates, to come to Nova Scotia, particularly ones who have a lot of experience. The problem was, Mr. Speaker, we had these doctors with 10 years of experience as a cardiac surgeon or anesthesiologist in Western Europe or Japan or Australia who maybe wanted to come here, or South Africa, and they couldn't come here, Mr. Speaker, without having to go through the whole process again. And this will allow them to jump over a few steps and ensure that their standards meet our standards, yet they're going to be able to become doctors sooner. And that is good news. But let me say this. This province is not a leader in the area. This has been done in Manitoba for a while, Mr. Speaker. And on top of it, let's talk about what this government is doing. Not the College of Physicians and Surgeons, not MISA. They seem to be going ahead and doing things to encourage immigrants to come to this province, while this government and this minister continue to put roadblocks up for people who want to come to this province. We all know full well that the Cornwallis Group and the PNP program has been a failure. Mr. Speaker, that's just not me saying that. The executive director of his own program, Mr. Speaker, was on the radio this morning saying the fee structure we have for the nominee program needs to be reviewed because we've only had 72 come in here so far. That clearly is code, and not very, I mean, you can clearly read between the lines, Mr. Speaker, that the program has been a failure. There's a need to review it. I'm glad to see this minister's department has recognized that, is determining a way to try and get out of that awful contract with Cornwallis so we can begin to have immigrants coming to this province so we can continue to secure the prosperity of Nova Scotians. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The honourable member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to rise in the House today on behalf of our caucus and as the critic for immigration to speak about the program to assess skills of internationally trained family doctors. I'd like to focus on the positive point about our non-governmental agencies like MISA, like the professional societies as well, the College of Physicians and Surgeons, and the good work that they're doing to really to advance this province in terms of our integration and welcome of new Canadians. The Office of Immigration is long overdue, Mr. Speaker. It is a welcome step, albeit a small one. The government has decided to recognize the important contributions immigrants make to our province. In fact, our municipalities themselves are taking a lead in these efforts to retain immigrants through the Atlantic Mayors Conference, which is currently underway right now on immigration at Pier 21. The government's new initiative is a good one, yet we worry about the immediate strain it may cause to the healthcare system, which is already in crisis. Mentors are the key to the success of this program. Although we know the quality and dedication of our province's doctors is second to none, I raise the caution about adding additional hours and tasks to doctors already under considerable strain in the ailing system. Mr. Speaker, our caucus looks forward to seeing a plan from this government that will build on today's announcements, a detailed plan, one that includes protection in terms of work hours and reward for the physicians as well that are becoming mentors. We know that well-trained immigrants are coming to our province, and we need to find more ways to integrate them into our professions in Canada. This step today is a small step, and we need many more. This is just the beginning. We look forward to our province's newest doctors joining our healthcare system, lessening the current strain, and helping to ease the current crisis in healthcare. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any further statements by ministers? Government notice the motion. The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Provincial Black Basketball Association will be holding its 33rd annual Black Invitational Tournament at the end of May, and whereas teams from all over Canada and the United States play in this annual tournament, where Nova Scotians are a witness to some of the best amateur basketball in Canada, And whereas this is a memorial tournament started 33 years ago to remember the contributions made to the black community by the late Terry Dixon, therefore be it resolved that all members of this House join me in sending our congratulations to the Provincial Black Basketball Association on holding its 33rd annual Black Invitational Tournament and for showcasing Nova Scotia's basketball abilities to the rest of Canada and to the United States. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passes without debate.
Question for waiver is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. Now, Minister of Service, Nova Scotia, Municipal Relations.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas on March 11, 2005, the Preston Cherrybrook chapter of the Congress of Black Women of Canada held their 10th annual night of recognition for women who made a difference at the Nova Scotia Black Cultural Centre. And whereas this year's honoured recipients are Daisy Rosella Bundy Gross of Cherrybrook, Martha Brown of New Glasgow and Dartmouth, Jacqueline Cromwell of Upper Hammonds Plains, and Dr. Agnes Celeste of Antigonish, and whereas certificates of appreciation were given to Phyllis Marsh Jarvis and Ruby Ann Williams and Sonia Ann Williams for their contributions towards the night's festivals. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House join me in sending our congratulations to the four honoured recipients for continuing to make a difference in their community and for being strong role models for young African Nova Scotian women. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Waiver is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Order, please. The Honourable Minister of Economic Development.
I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas last year Nova Scotians demonstrated their faith in Nova Scotia by investing $3.2 million in community development investment funds, making the 2004 tax year the best in the program's 5-year history. And whereas more than 2,400 Nova Scotians have invested over $13.4 million in 26 of these funds since the program began in 2000, and whereas these funds provide jobs and valuable investment dollars for smaller community-based enterprises, therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House congratulate everyone who has developed and invested in community economic development investment funds and encourage more Nova Scotians to develop more funds and invest more dollars in local enterprises so that we meet or exceed next year's program target of $4 million. And I respectfully request waiver of notice, Mr. Speaker.
Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Deputy Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas National Road Safety Week is a special week designated to focus on safe driving practices and timed in conjunction with Canada's first holiday weekend of the summer, when the motorists will be out in great numbers. And whereas the Department of Transportation and Public Works, along with the Road Safety Advisory Committee and the Canadian Council of Motor Transport Administrators, strive to create awareness of the importance of road safety. And whereas this province supports and is guided by Road Safety Vision 2010, a national effort to reach the goal of making Canada's roads the safest in the world, therefore be it resolved that all members of this House recognize that May 17th to 23rd, 2005 as National Road Safety Week. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waiver is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Cape Breton District Health Authority has honoured two individuals, Edgar McLeod, Chief of Police, and Dr. Andrew Link, pediatrician, the winners of the Donald Ferguson Health Leadership Award and Healthcare Provider of the Year Award, respectively. Whereas the Donald Ferguson Health Leadership Award recognizes Chief McLeod's significant contributions to the protection of the public health, particularly in the area of family violence. And whereas the Public Care Provider of the Year Award recognizes Dr. Andrew Link as someone who demonstrates exemplary service to his community to raise the level of health care both provincially and nationally. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House congratulate these two people on winning these prestigious awards. Mr. Speaker, I seek waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day. I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Annapolis Valley Regional School Board recognized that 75% of their schools had obsolete fluorescent lighting, and whereas converting to more efficient T8 lamps and electronic ballasts will save the school board 28% in electricity costs, and whereas the Department of Energy provided a grant to supplement their existing budget to expand this energy savings project throughout the school board district, therefore be it resolved that the members of this House congratulate the Annapolis Valley Regional School Board on their initiative to improve the energy efficiency of schools, thereby reducing the production of greenhouse gas. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Health Promotion.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas suicide prevention is one of 3 priority areas of the provincial injury prevention strategy, because we recognize that even one needless death is too many. And whereas our coordinator of injury prevention and control met recently with the staff of the Department of Health's Mental Health Services, at which time they agreed to work together to engage stakeholders in the development of a comprehensive suicide prevention strategy beginning in June of this year, with an expected completion date of December 2005. And whereas health promotion will provide leadership to this work, but it will be a collaborative effort with mental health services and stakeholders from across sectors, in which we will combine existing initiatives and strategies. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this House recognize the dedication of all those involved who will be involved in the strategy to reducing the number of suicides among Nova Scotians. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Department of Energy is supporting Nova Scotia Agricultural College to lead 2 climate change initiatives in the agricultural industry, and whereas the first initiative will reduce greenhouse gas emissions by increasing nitrogen use efficiency to expand agriculture's economic competitiveness and lessen its effect on the environment, and whereas the second initiative will educate farmers on energy efficiency through an awareness program and the creation of a small wind generator at the Bioenvironmental and Engineering Centre in the Agritech Park in Truro, therefore be it resolved that members of this House recognize the Nova Scotia Agricultural College for creating climate change initiatives that will increase energy efficiency and reduce greenhouse gas emissions from farming activities. And Mr. Speaker, request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day. I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Lunenburg County Ground Search and Rescue is celebrating its 27th year of operation in Lunenburg County, and whereas the life-saving services that are provided by this organization could not be carried out without the dedicated volunteers that make up this service, and whereas it's at its recent annual meeting, Al Parsons, Cyril Mullins, and Albert Rayfuse were recognized for 5, 10, and 15 years, respectively, of dedicated service to the Lunenburg County Ground Search and Rescue. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of the House of Assembly recognize the significant contribution that the Lunenburg County Ground Search and Rescue has made to our community, and thank Al Parsons, Cyril Mullins, and Albert Rayfuse for their dedicated service over the years. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. Introduction of bills. The Honourable Member for Preston.
Before I introduce the bill, could I do an introduction in your gallery? Yes, in the Speaker's Gallery, representatives from the Beachfield community have come today to watch the proceedings of the House. Is Ada Thompson, Rudy Farmer, Donna Simmons, Marjorie Wright, Doris Shepard, Joan Jackson, Sheila Kaiser, Eric Murphy, Michael Beals, Cecil Wright, Miles Parks, Carol Ann Wright Parks, Clarence Wright, Charles Wright, Lorraine Hamilton Higgins, and Curtis Jarvis. And I would ask the members of the legislature to give them a round warm of applause and welcome to the legislature.
Welcome our guests to the gallery today and hope they enjoy the proceedings. The Honourable Member for Preston on the introduction of bills.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. A big right to Hereby, I'd like to put a bill in as an act to ensure a right-of-way for the Beachville Baptist Church to Lovett Lake for baptisms.
The honourable member for Preston begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Ensure a Right-of-Way for the Beachville Baptist Church to Lovett Lake for baptisms.
Bill 216, entitled An Act to Ensure a Right-of-Way for the Beachville Baptist Church to Lovett Lake for baptisms.
Order this bill be read a second time at a future date. Notice of motion. The honourable leader of the official opposition.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas today's appointment of Belinda Stronach to the Federal Liberal Cabinet increases the opportunity of approval this week for the Atlantic Accord and new money to improve access to higher education. And whereas members on all sides of this House have demonstrated a spirit of cooperation, giving a higher value to the common good than to partisan differences. And whereas the approval of measures that are highly valued by Nova Scotians still hang in the balance. Therefore, be it resolved that this House urges all 11 members of the Parliament from Nova Scotia to support the Atlantic Accord and other positive features in the federal budget, recognizing that the opportunity to engage in a federal election will come soon enough. And Mr. Speaker, I would request waiver and passage without debate.
Waiver. I hear no. Notice is tabled. The honourable member for Glace Bay.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas during the Premier's statement he said, "I think we have to resolve the health care crisis." And whereas the first step to resolving a problem is admitting there is one. And whereas the light bulb has finally come on. Therefore, be it resolved, members of this House demand that the Premier act immediately to begin to repair the damage done by his government's mismanagement of health care in this province. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waiver, here no. Notice is tabled. The honourable Minister of Education on introduction.
Thank you, Speaker. And in the East Gallery, I'd like to introduce Matt Wynot and Ashley Smith, who are two members of the Nova Scotia Youth Advisory Council. And for the members of the House, the Nova Scotia Youth Advisory Council is a voluntary group of young Nova Scotians that meets regularly to discuss youth issues and how they relate to government programs and policies. The Council also acts as a sounding board for me in my role as Minister responsible of youth. Now, Mr. Wynot is a political science student at St. Mary's University who was extremely involved in the United Church of Canada and was also a member of the Nova Scotia Youth Tobacco Advisory Committee. And Ms. Smith is a student at St. Francis Xavier University who has served as co-chair and public relations representative of the Provincial Student Educational Council. And I would ask Mr. Wynot and Ms. Smith to rise and receive the warm and congratulatory greeting of the members of the legislature for their efforts to highlight the ideas of young Nova Scotians to government. Welcome.
The honourable member for Kings North.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas two Kings County businesses won 2 of 13 annual awards presented annually by the Nova Scotia Resource Recovery Fund Board in mid-April. And whereas Valley Tire was named Nova Scotia's Tire Retailer of the Year and Scotian Gold Cooperative was named Business of the Year. And whereas Valley Tire has been operational in Kentville since 1974, employing 20 people with a second outlet having operated in Bridgewater for the past 11 years. And Scotia Gold Cooperative presently has a full-time crew monitoring and maintaining its 20,000 apple bins. Therefore, be resolved that all MLAs of this House extend our congratulations to President Harold Quigley of Valley Tire and his two sons Derek and Stephen, and to Scotian Gold's CEO David Cudmore and Operations Manager Murdoch McKenzie for winning these 2 RRFB prestigious awards. I request waiver.
Request for waiver is agreed. All those in favour say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Cole Harbour Eastern Passage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Robert Frank is recognized throughout the world as a leading photographer in the 20th century for his revolutionary style and for his masterwork, The Americans, published in the late 1950s. Whereas Robert Frank, who was described by Jack Kerouac as among the tragic poets of the world, recently had a show at the Tate Museum in London showcasing his photographs from the past 60 years. And whereas Robert Frank is a resident of Mabou, and as a longtime resident of our province, must be recognized for his contribution to art not only in Nova Scotia but throughout the world. Therefore, be it resolved that this House congratulate Robert Frank on his recent show at the Tate Museum in London and recognize his contribution to the art of photography. And I ask for waiver, Mr. Speaker.
Question for waivers, it agreed. All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Annapolis on introduction and resolution.
I'd like to draw the attention of the House to the West Gallery, where we have 25 students from Bridgetown Regional High School's grade 9 Sciences Semaine class, along with their chaperones, Shirley Willett, Neva Westcott, Jack Westcott, Andrea McNeil, and their teacher, Madame Olford. And I would ask them to stand and receive the warm welcome of the House.
Certainly welcome our special guests to the gallery today and hope they enjoy the proceedings. The honourable member for Preston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the state of the Mineville Road in Mineville is appalling, as illustrated in the Liberal Caucus website page entitled Neglected Road of the Week. And whereas the residents have taken it upon themselves to inform fellow motorists of the potholes and dangerous hazards created by the poor condition of the road. And whereas the community is growing and traffic is increasing on a daily basis, and the department and staff have been trying to keep up with the ever-increasing number of potholes. Therefore, be resolved that members of this House urge the Minister of Transportation to act immediately to have the Mineville Road resurfaced. And I'd ask for waiver.
Question waivers that agreed. Here no. Notice is tabled. The honourable member for Waverley, Fall River, Beaverbank.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Nova Scotia Equestrian Federation is now preparing for a 2005 season full of activity, and whereas Robin Gilligan from Wellington enjoyed a successful 2004 season as she was named champion in the small medium pony hunter division and in the pleasure pony open division, while capturing reserve championship honors in the open road hack pony class, and while Katrina Noonan of Beaverbank won the dressage competition in the third level junior category. Therefore, be resolved that all MLAs of this House extend our best wishes to Robin and Katrina for their successful 2004 season and wish them every success in 2005 and beyond. Mr. Speaker, request waiver of notice.
Request for waivers that agreed. All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Halifax Needham.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, before I do my resolution, I'd like to draw the attention of members of the House to the West Gallery, the West Gallery, where we have 4 representatives of the Metro Coalition for a Non-Racist Society, the group that have had distributed today the booklet that all of the members have on their desks. And I would ask that Bevan Meyer Rash, Carol Millett, and Donna Malone stand and receive the warm welcome of the House, please. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Metro Coalition for a Non-Racist Society was founded in July of 1991 to show unity with people and communities of African descent in the struggle against racism in Nova Scotia. And whereas the Metro Coalition for a Non-Racist Society supports demands for change by First Nations and Aboriginal peoples and by people of African descent and other races, works for change in its members' own families, communities, and workplaces, and provides financial support and resources to specific struggles against racism. And whereas the Metro Coalition for a Non-Racist Society has recently published a revised edition of the book, Racism, Whose Problem? Strategies for Understanding and Confronting Racism in Our Communities, written by Jocelyn Boyd and members of the Society. Therefore, be it resolved that this House recognize the efforts of the Metro Coalition for a Non-Racist Society to improve life for all Nova Scotians and congratulates the Coalition on the occasion of the republication of their book. Mr. Speaker, I seek waiver and passage without debate.
Request for waivers that agreed. All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded say nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Richmond.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas former Conservative leadership candidate and MP Belinda Stronach has demonstrated true leadership and crossed the floor to become a Liberal cabinet minister. Whereas Belinda Stronach is putting her country before partisan political interests, unlike the members of her former party. And whereas unlike Nova Scotia's Conservative MPs, who have cast their lot with the separatists, Stronach is supporting a budget and a party that will ensure the Atlantic Accord, money for education, money for health, and overall a brighter future for Canada. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this House congratulate Belinda Stronach for supporting Canada and, most importantly, the interests of all Nova Scotians. And, Mr. Speaker, I'd ask for a waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Here are several noes. And those tabled. The honourable member for Cape Breton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas one of the greatest honors is for an individual to serve as an elected official, municipally, provincially, or federally, and whereas since 1758, more than 1,250 Nova Scotians have been elected as MLAs, and whereas the government House Leader, and also the member for Hants West, is presently the Dean of this legislature, serving 27 years as of 2005, and winning 8 consecutive elections, now affording him the distinction of being the 4th longest serving MLA since 1758. Therefore, be it resolved, all members of the House of Assembly congratulate the member for Hants West on his outstanding contribution to public service in Nova Scotia, and I would ask for a waiver of notice and passage without debate.
For waivers, it agreed. All those in favour say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. Order, please.
He's crossing the floor. He's coming over.
Order. Order, please. That will put the Honourable Deputy Premier probably about halfway through his career, right? The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Roderick J. McLennan of Truro has been named to the Order of Canada, whereas Rod McLennan is a Nova Scotian who has given in exemplary measure his time and talent for the benefit of others, whereas Rod McLennan has been a leader in many areas, among them the Boy Scouts, the Canadian Blood Service, the Dalhousie Medical Research Foundation, and the performing arts through the establishment of the Charles and Mary McLennan Foundation. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House congratulate Rod J. McLennan on being named to the Order of Canada and thank him for his continuing commitment to improve the lives of Nova Scotians. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waivers, it agreed. All those in favour say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Dartmouth South, Portland Valley.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to make an introduction before I do my resolution. In the East Gallery, we have students from the Political Science and Global History courses at Dartmouth High School with their teacher, Don Houle, parents, Mr. Cochran and Mrs. DeBoer, and Mrs. Collins, the Education Program Assistant. I would ask everyone to give them a warm welcome. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the 29th Model Parliament at Dartmouth High School was held April 6 to 8, 2005, and whereas over 150 students were involved as MPs, clerks, parliamentary press, sound and technical crew, sergeant-at-arms and pages, with 10 community leaders as guest speakers and governor-generals, and whereas students, staff, parents, and guests appreciated and learned from the high standard of research, debate, and performance, therefore be it resolved that the Nova Scotia Legislature congratulate and thank all participants and their teacher advisor, Donald Houle, for the success of the 29th Dartmouth High School Model Parliament. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waivers, it agreed. All those in favour say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Halifax, Clayton Park.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the government has recently launched their new education blueprint entitled Learning for Life 2, And whereas this plan, and indeed the government's most recent budget, are completely without vision or any kind of plan for post-secondary students in our province, and whereas the Department of Education obviously believes that learning for life stops at grade 12, therefore be it resolved that members of this House realize that learning is a lifelong process, and along with preschool to grade 12, post-secondary education is also vital to the future of our province. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question waiver, here no. Notice is tabled. The Honourable Minister of Human Resources.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice, and on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the South Shore of Nova Scotia is blessed with many excellent artists, and whereas many of these artists share both artistic talents and their cultural background with their community, and whereas Norbert and Helga Sattler established their first stained glass studio in Germany 25 years ago, and in 1993 moved to West La Have, Lunenburg County to open their second stained glass studio. Therefore be it resolved that all members of the House congratulate Norbert and Helga Sattler on their 25th anniversary of producing world-class stained glass artwork, which can be found in churches, cathedrals, and homes around the world. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Dartmouth North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I do just briefly want to mention that I too welcome the students and teachers of Dartmouth High School here today to watch the proceedings of this House. I also want to say that I've been honored to be the Speaker of their model Parliament each and every year for the last 7 years, and I certainly have learned a lot, Mr. Speaker, over that period of time. So I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Dartmouth High School has a strong tradition of providing its students with an opportunity to participate in the democratic process through its annual model parliament, and whereas these students create their own political parties, learn about political representation, the role of government and the opposition, and the need for parliamentary debate, and whereas this model parliament involves students in the political process, thus helps society by reinforcing the democratic process. Therefore be it resolved that the Nova Scotia Legislature congratulate the students of the Dartmouth High School for participating in model parliament and thank their teacher, Don Houle, for his continuing efforts to develop an understanding of the democratic process in his students. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas La Béangeois, a dance troupe from Clare, recently participated in the British Association of Teachers of Dancing Festival of Dance, May 13 to May 15, 2005. And whereas La Béangeois placed first in their category, which included other dancing groups from Atlantic Canada, and had the highest mark for step dancing. And whereas La Béangeois placed first amongst the Nova Scotia dancing groups that competed in the category of Nova Scotia's traditional dancers, therefore be resolved that La Béangeois be congratulated for winning the BATD Trophy for the Festival of Dance Rose Bowl and for winning the Dance Nova Scotia Trophy for traditional dance. Mr. Speaker, I would ask waiver of notice, please.
Question for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas students from primary to grade 4 at the Antigonish East Education Centre raised $17,100 for the Nova Scotia Heart and Stroke Foundation during their recent Jump into Fun fundraiser, and whereas more than 370 students collected pledges and jumped rope for an extended period of time to make the donation, which was almost triple the donation to the foundation from last year, and was accepted by the Northeastern Area Manager, Sabrina Vatcher. And whereas monies raised from such events like this stay in the province and are used by the Foundation for research, education, and other projects, and how that the area manager pointed out that an amount like this is unheard of outside of the Halifax Regional Municipality. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of the House congratulate the primary to grade 4 students at the Antigonish Education Centre and their physical education teacher Mary Lou Cameron and Principal Milford Austin for working together and having fun to make a generous donation to such a worthy cause as the Nova Scotia Heart and Stroke Foundation. Mr. Speaker, I seek waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Waiver is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Cape Breton Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Minister of Community Services apologized to this House for the unfounded allegations he made about the MLA for Halifax Needham. And whereas the Minister then used the word inappropriate at least 15 times to describe his allegations. And whereas, nevertheless, that minister has gone on to repeat his allegations by endorsing them further in media interviews. Therefore, be it resolved that this House urges the Premier and the Minister of Community Services to retract remarks about another member which are unfounded and, in the Minister's own words, inappropriate, rather than compounding the offence by repeating the allegation. I seek waiver, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Waiver is agreed. Here, no. Notice is tabled. The honourable member for Digby Annapolis.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Digby, Nova Scotia is one of the most romantic towns in the world to live, and whereas Digby boasts about their world-famous scallops and mouth-watering lobsters and their great whale watching, and whereas the tourists who travel through Digby never forget the quaint atmosphere and the natural beauty that they have enjoyed. Therefore, be it resolved that every member of the Nova Scotia House of Assembly take the time to travel through and enjoy all Digby and all that the surrounding communities have to offer. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice, passage without debate.
Mr. Waiver is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future date I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Northside and Area Community Planning Group identified a need for an entrepreneurship program back in October of 2000, and whereas Memorial Composite High School in City Mines offered the course initially in 2003 to its grade 12 students, and whereas this cutting-edge course introduces entrepreneurship as a viable career option and helps students recognize that they can create their own opportunities and enjoy more control over their destinies, therefore it be resolved that all members of this House join me in congratulating the Northside and Area Community Planning Group for their commitment to our youth and business community, as well as to Memorial Composite High School for their leadership and curriculum delivery. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. Order, please. Now, member for Hants East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Canadians are too often known for not promoting their own artists, and whereas talent is not bound by any particular geography or demographic, and whereas singer, songwriter, storyteller Rich Trefai, aka Buck 65, was born and raised in Mount Uniacke, Nova Scotia, and in 2004 received a Juno for his best alternative album, Talkin' Honky Blues, and was nominated in 2005 for Songwriter of the Year. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this House of Assembly congratulate this native son, Rich Trefai, and wish him well in all of his future endeavors. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver notice and passage without debate.
Request for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Victoria the Lakes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Brian White of the Mill Pond Road on Bullardry Island has successfully completed the required courses and credits to be a 2005 graduate of Cape Breton University, and whereas Brian White enrolled as a mature student as a result of a career change brought on by health reasons as a result of being an injured worker, and whereas Brian White successfully graduated with a diploma in civil technology and also a degree in environmental studies. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House congratulate Brian White on his successful road to education and career change. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver and passage without debate.
Request for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister for Human Resources.
Mr. Speaker, I read this on behalf of my colleague, the Minister of Natural Resources. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas in 1985, teacher Joseph Beshara and 12 students founded the Maple Grove and Yarmouth High Memorial Club, a volunteer group that performs services to veterans and seniors in Canada and especially in Yarmouth County. And whereas between 150 and 200 young people each year join the club that reminds Nova Scotians to thank a veteran, pray for our armed forces, be proud of our country, and to never forget our valiant war dead. And whereas in addition to about 50 volunteer functions each year, club members undertake an annual trip to Halifax, where their marching band performs at Camp Hill and at the Grand Parade. Therefore, be it resolved, all members of the House commend Joseph Bechara and members of the Maple Grove and Yarmouth High Memorial Club for 20 years of invaluable community service and their unwavering dedication to Canadian seniors and veterans. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice.
Request for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counter-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day. I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Sharon D. Elliott has contributed hours of volunteer work in Annapolis County, including her dedication and teaching skills with the Bridgetown Computer Access Site for 4 years, and whereas Sharon has worked since 1996 with the Bridgetown RCMP Foundation on a senior safety project, which also includes the involvement of the Annapolis West Health Foundation and the Soldiers Memorial Hospital Foundation, and whereas Sharon has sat on the Annapolis Community Health Board since 1999 and was and remains the first chair of the VON Live Advisory Committee, therefore be it resolved, all MLAs in this House of Assembly extend our appreciation to Sharon Elliott for her tremendous work ethic and volunteer spirit in Annapolis County, and I request waiver of notice.
Request for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counter-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Pictou West.
Monsieur le Président, j'avais que je procéderai à une date ultérieure l'adoption de la résolution suivante. Attendu que le Bureau des Affaires acadiens a offert de la formation linguistique en français par la Université de Sainte-Anne et attendu qu'il y a une grande participation aux classes de mercredi soir, en particulier par les membres de la législature de Eastern Shore, du Cap-Breton West, Lunenburg West, Cumberland South, Pictou East and Pictou West, et avec l'aide compétente du professeur Alberto Boutet, et attendu que cette formation linguistique en français a enrichi les connaissances des membres de la législature aussi bien orales qu'écrites, qu'il soit résolu que les membres de la législature de la Nouvelle-Écosse remercient le Bureau des Affaires acadiens pour avoir offert des cours de français aux députés. Monsieur le Président, je demande l'adoption de cette résolution sans préavis et sans débat. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Office of Acadian Affairs has offered French language training for legislators through University St. Anne, and whereas there has been a good participation in the Wednesday evening class, in particular by the members of the legislature from the Eastern Shore, Cape Breton West, Lunenburg West, Cumberland South, Pictou East, and Pictou West, and with the capable help of teacher Alberto Boutet. And whereas this French language training has increased the knowledge of MLAs in both the oral and written use of the language, therefore it be resolved that the members of the Nova Scotia Legislature thank the Office of Acadian Affairs for offering this French course to legislators. And Mr. Speaker, I seek waiver and passage without debate.
Request for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counter-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Glace Bay.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Jonathan David Reed Wilson graduates on May 24th from Dalhousie University with a Bachelor of Science in Biology degree, and whereas Jonathan is the valedictorian for the science class and has served as Vice President of Finance and Operations for Dalhousie Student Union, and whereas Jonathan has currently accepted a position with the Royal Bank of Canada. Therefore, be it resolved, the members of this House congratulate Jonathan Wilson for his success and wish him the best in his future endeavors. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counter-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Hants East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas a life of faith and serving is a blessing to many, and whereas Sister Claire Murphy of the Order of the Sisters of Charity has dedicated more than 65 years to a life of serving God and the people with enthusiasm, dedication, humility, and humor. And whereas in April 2005 she was awarded the Elizabeth Ann Seton Award for her dedicated work by the Sisters of Charity. And therefore be resolved, this House of Assembly congratulates Sister Claire Murphy on receiving the Elizabeth Ann Seton Award from the Sisters of Charity and thank her for her years of faithful service. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counter-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Halifax Atlantic.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas St. Augustine's Church was first established as a mission church in 1896 in a small stone building designed by William Critchlow Harris on land donated by Sir Sanford Fleming on a slope above the Northwest Arm, and whereas the church has since then served the people of the Arm Village and environs, so it moved to a new building in 1963, and whereas on Sunday, May 15th, Bishop Fred Hiltz presided over the dedication of a new stained glass window in memory of members of the Copus, McGinnon and Graven families. Therefore be it resolved that this House congratulate Father John Scott and the families on the dedication of the new stained glass window, welcome organist Barbara Wilson, and wish the parish continued good health in the years to come. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counter-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Cape Breton Nova.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on the future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Duncan Roderick McKay will turn 90 years of age on May 18, 2005, and whereas in August of 2004, Mr. McKay was a recipient of the Governor General's Caring Canadian Award, presented in recognition for his hours of volunteer service to his community, and whereas Mr. McKay has also contributed over 50 years service to the Masonic Order and over 60 years service to Scouts Canada, and played a prominent role in Whitney Pier Rink becoming a reality. Therefore, be it resolved, the members of this Legislative Assembly wish Duncan Roderick McKay a very happy birthday, thank him for his commitment to his community and for his long-time alliance to the New Democratic Party. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counter-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Sackville-Cobequid.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Nova Scotians have relied on volunteer firefighters for many years to help protect and serve their communities in time of need, and whereas this year marks the 50th anniversary of the Sackville Volunteer Firefighters Organization in Lower Sackville, and whereas a sacrifice is made by both families and volunteers because of the commitment to education, training, and answering emergency calls, therefore be it resolved that the members of this Legislative Assembly congratulate the Sackville Firefighters volunteer organization on their 50th anniversary and thank the families and volunteers for their commitment to the safety and protections of residents of Lower Sackville. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counter-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Colchester Musquodoboit Valley on the introduction.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, through you and to all members of the Nova Scotia Legislative Chamber, I would like to draw their attention to the East Gallery. And we have with us this afternoon, I guess it's half of the grade 8 class that Mr. Rick Hiltz has the privilege of teaching. And as the MLA for the beautiful Colchester Musquodoboit Valley, I'm delighted to ask our young people and their 4 leaders if they would stand and receive a warm round of applause from the members in the chamber. And I'd like to advise members in this chamber that some of these students come from the communities of the Upper Stewiacke Valley, from the town of Stewiacke, from Coldstream, from Truro Heights, and a lot of the small communities in central Nova Scotia. And I know the MLA for Truro Bible Hill as well would like to personally welcome everybody here today. So please rise and receive a welcome from the MLAs.
Welcome our special guests to the gallery and hope they enjoy the proceedings. The honourable member for Timberley Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I'll be asking for waiver and passage without debate. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas on Monday, March 28th, on the Lewisburg Highway, an accident involving two motor vehicles occurred. And whereas Jeff Ormond and Michael McNeil, who arrived on the scene, helped pull the injured from the vehicles before one of the vehicles caught fire and burst into flames. And whereas the quick action of these two fine young men was instrumental in lives being saved at the accident scene, therefore be it resolved that the Nova Scotia Legislature congratulate Jeff Ormond and Michael McNeil on their act of courage, putting their lives at risk to save the lives of others. I ask for waiver and passage without debate, Mr. Speaker.
Request for waiver is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Countermanded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Cole Harbour is for passage.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the backbone of any school is the secretary who ensures both students and staff are well taken care of. Whereas Mary Conrad, a longtime resident of Cal Bay, started working for the Halifax County School Board in 1975 at Tallahassee Elementary School. And whereas Mary Conrad is retiring after 30 years as a school secretary, the last 16 at Ocean View School in Eastern Passage. Therefore, be it resolved that this House recognize the contributions of Mary Conrad and wish her all the best on her retirement after 30 years of service as a school secretary in Eastern Passage. I ask for waiver, Mr. Speaker.
Request for waiver is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Countermanded nay. Motion is carried. Orders of the day oral questions put by members. Question period begin at 1:07 and end at 2:07. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Well, Mr. Speaker, this past weekend, I and my Cape Breton caucus members sat down and listened to the concerns of the citizens against strip mining. We left with an unequivocal message. They do not want strip mines. One of the greatest problems voiced by this group was that they feel no one is listening to them and their legitimate concerns for the area's natural beauty, their water, the local fisheries, and the poor track records of some of the proponents, as well as the poor work being done in vetting the proposals which have come forward, Mr. Speaker. So my question for the Minister of Natural Resources is this: what process has been undertaken to ensure that these concerns have been dealt with and that the residents in the affected areas have been listened to?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and through you to the member opposite. I can assure him and all members of the House that this minister has listened to the concerns of the citizens. He's met with every group that's asked for a meeting with me. And the good Minister of Department of Environment and Labour has already announced, and I think he's awarded the contract for a study onto the coal fields in the Cape Breton area, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your first supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, an April 2004 report on the tender evaluations, which I will table, looked at the original call for proposals in Port Morion and Bowlandry Island blocks, found that these proposals were lacking, and the panel was left with three choices. They could ask the bidders for more information, they could reject the bids outright, or they could award the proposals to them because they were the only bidders. The panel, and ultimately the government, recommended option 3, citing there were no other bidders. The proponents won by default. So my question for the minister was this: while there were other options available, why did you not act in the best interests of the people and rather in the best interests of the proponents?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And through you to the member, I can assure all members that we are acting in the best for all Nova Scotians, and we're looking at environmental concerns, human health and safety concerns in the area that we're discussing, Mr. Speaker. And that's why the Minister of Environment and Labour has introduced a study for the coal fields in the Cape Breton area. And, Mr. Speaker, I'm waiting for the remarks to come back from the consultant onto that.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, their own tender evaluation said that more rigorous information was required. Now, if I've learned one thing this past weekend, it is that these people want their voices to be heard, not just listened to. So, Mr. Speaker, my question for the minister is this: how can the residents be expected to trust this department or this government when they have had little or no voice in the process and found out that the proponents of the projects are considered the best bidder only by virtue of the fact that they are the only bidder, Mr. Speaker?
The Honourable Minister of Department of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker, but we cannot force the hand of private industry. If people wishes to bid on a proposal, that is entirely up to the individuals. But, Mr. Speaker, I can assure you and all members of the House that there's mechanisms in place for safeguards for these citizens and for these citizens to be heard. Mr. Speaker, all the component today has is the rights for the resource. They have to go through an environmental assessment which will be carried out by the Department of Environment and Labour. And Mr. Speaker, those concerns of those citizens I have forwarded on to the Minister of Environment and Labour, and we have, I can assure that member and all members that we take the concerns of the citizen at heart and we will deal with them. Thank you.
The honourable member for Glace Bay.
Mr. Speaker, last evening, the Premier stated that our health care system is in crisis. For the first time this session, perhaps the first time ever, Mr. Speaker, the Premier has admitted his failure. 5 years of rhetoric, no plan to fix a health system in crisis. Mr. Speaker, we've learned that a well-known cardiac anesthesiologist at the QE2 is leaving the public health care system. He's leaving the system, Mr. Speaker, with plans to take up duties at the private health clinic in Dartmouth 2 days a week. Mr. Speaker, our worst fears have now become reality. An overstrained public system becomes more strained, specialists departing for more lucrative and less stressful opportunities. The Premier is right, Mr. Speaker. The health care system is in crisis. My question to the Premier, then, Mr. Speaker, what are you going to do, Mr. Premier, to restore confidence in a public health care system that is clearly in crisis?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And the member opposite is right. Anesthesiology is an ongoing concern of this government, of the district health authorities that are providing health care from one end of this province to the other. It is a vexing problem, Mr. Speaker, and the member opposite, as is his talent, outlines very clearly the problem. The government will deal with the solutions, Mr. Speaker. And one of the solutions we have is the aggressive recruitment program that's going on to bring more anesthesiologists to the province of Nova Scotia.
The honourable member for Glace Bay on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the Premier may have missed the point here. You have the best cardiac anesthesiologist in the country that is leaving the QE2. Wait times for semi-urgent cardiovascular surgery, they're already well above target. They'll only get longer as a result of that respected specialist's departure. So my question to the Premier is, when is he going to take steps to fix an admitted crisis caused by anesthesiologists and other specialists who are leaving or planning to leave the public health care system in this province?
The Honourable the Premier.
I refer that to the Minister of Health.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And the honourable member, as the Premier indicated, is very good at outlining problems. But, Mr. Speaker, we're working very aggressively with the District Health Authority in recruiting anesthesiologists to this province. Our challenge, Mr. Speaker, is not an isolated challenge. We're dealing with a shortage of anesthesiologists, which is nationwide, and indeed throughout North America there is a challenge with respect to recruitment. We are really competing effectively with other jurisdictions, Mr. Speaker. We will continue to do so, and we will continue to attract the best medical brains there are in the country to this region for the people of Nova Scotia.
The honourable member for Glace Bay on your final supplementary.
You know, Mr. Speaker, isn't it funny? Yesterday morning, the healthcare system was fine. Last night, crisis. Mr. Speaker, this Premier created this crisis, and the people of Nova Scotia are suffering as a result. What happened to the John Ham plan for health that we were promised 5 years ago? Mr. Speaker, the Premier knows there was no plan. Wait times are going to start to get even longer if this Premier fails to provide a plan for health care right now. My final question to the Premier: how can the Premier assure Nova Scotians shorter wait times when we already have a chronic shortage of specialists such as anesthesiologists who are overworked and apparently underappreciated?
The Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I refer that to the Minister of Health.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, imagine the source. talking about a crisis in health care. When this government came to office in 1999, Mr. Speaker, they had chased out all of the nurses in this province. They chased out the doctors of this province, Mr. Speaker. They left us bankrupt of human resources. We have been building that back, Mr. Speaker, since then, and we have made an unprecedented commitment to health care in this province. We'll continue to make that commitment, Mr. Speaker, and we have a much better health care system today than we inherited in 1999, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is also for the Minister of Health. Mr. Speaker, Lorraine Weatherby has been waiting for hernia repair surgery now for 16 months. A month ago, she was up to number 5 on her surgeon's waiting list. But in the meantime, more urgent cases than hers have bumped Mrs. Weatherby even further down the list. Her surgery has to be completed in Halifax, and Mrs. Weatherby is just one of many patients facing increased wait times due to the lack of beds and limited operating room time. So I want to ask the Minister, why has the wait time situation been allowed to get to this point?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The wait time issue is something that we are working with the District Health Authority on. We're providing additional beds, both within the system itself as well as long-term care beds, Mr. Speaker. We do have a challenge with respect, as indicated in the previous question, with respect to anesthesiologists. That is being addressed, Mr. Speaker. We continue to recruit very vigorously in that area, and we are continuing to provide long-term care beds. We're continuing to deal with the acute care bed issue within our hospitals, Mr. Speaker, and we will continue to work with the District Health Authority toward a solution to this problem.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, Mrs. Weatherby's surgeon can only get 6 operating room days in the next 3 months. Even if the surgeon does 2 surgeries each day, he has the operating room available, it could be the 2-year mark or later before Mrs. Weatherby gets her surgery. Meanwhile, her hernias are causing serious complications, resulting in emergency room visits and, of course, Mr. Speaker, deteriorating health. So my question to the Minister of Health is, why is your department moving so slowly on the centralization of wait lists?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we have indeed been working rather vigorously at addressing the wait time. We have put in place a wait time monitoring committee. That committee is operating, Mr. Speaker. We are developing standards that all involved will understand, both from the point of view of the professionals, the administrators, the patients, and that information will be made available, Mr. Speaker. We will have a website up and operating in this province so that all people involved in the issue of wait time will have a real understanding of what is at stake each and every time.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your final supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure Mrs. Weatherby will take great comfort from the fact that her wait time is being monitored, Mr. Speaker. One of the biggest obstacles for major elective surgeries is the lack of hospital beds. And in April of this year, Mr. Speaker, there were 140 beds at Capital Health blocked by people waiting for a nursing home admission. So my final question to the Minister of Health is this: when will he finally take action and free up the beds blocked by patients who are waiting for beds in nursing homes?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the honourable member would know as a result of the budget that he supported and exercised good judgment in that support, that there was a reference to an additional 125 to 150 long-term care beds for the metropolitan area. Those plans are proceeding with, Mr. Speaker, and those beds will be built.
The honourable member for Glace Bay.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Premier. Mr. Speaker, core surgical procedures are under threat in a healthcare system that is currently in crisis. Anesthesiologists are leaving, more may leave, recruitment efforts are failing. In the past 2 weeks, we were told that the alternate funding agreement this government negotiated would require a specialist to honor his or her commitment to the public health care system. What the Premier failed to consider, Mr. Speaker, is what happens when a specialist tears up that agreement and leaves the public system permanently. So my question to the Premier, when will the Premier stop the bleeding of the public health care system and put forward a real plan that will retain and recruit specialists to Nova Scotia?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I could echo some of the comments of the Minister of Health when he described the situation in health when we became government in 1999. I could also remind the member opposite that he brings a problem to government. But I would ask that member, and I would cause all members of the House to think about the solution of that member's leader, and that is to take $140 million out of health care. What would that do, Mr. Speaker, to recruit anaesthetists? What would that do to shorten wait times, Mr. Speaker? Because that is the position of the leader of that member's party, to eliminate the current funding of health by $140 million.
The Honourable Member for Glace Bay on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, this government can't recruit on a competitive marketplace. They can't retain valued specialists in this province. We need longer hours for anesthesiologists. They offer considerably less pay than other jurisdictions in this province. If this situation continues, the system is going to implode, Mr. Speaker. That's what will happen. The admission of a crisis is an admission of failure, Mr. Speaker. What I'd like to ask the Premier, what specifically does the Premier plan to do to address the very crisis that he has created by his own neglect?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, because the member opposite indicated that the pay scale for anesthesiology is one of the problems. Mr. Speaker, just think what would happen to that pay scale if we followed the advice of that party and eliminated $140 million from the health care budget.
Now, Member for Glace Bay on your final supplementary.
Oh, Mr. Speaker, $1 billion more in health care, and what does the Premier have to show for it? A crisis after $1 billion in health care. Despite the government's spin that everything is fine, reality is it all came crashing down yesterday when the Premier admitted we have a health care crisis. For 6 years, Mr. Premier, you have done nothing, absolutely nothing. Mr. Speaker, the government has condemned previous premiers for spending too much on health without a plan, but the Premier is unwilling to live up to a standard that you have set for others. Mr. Speaker, the Emperor has no clothes. Mr. Speaker, my final question for the Premier. You've had 6 years to head off this crisis, Mr. Premier. What are you waiting for?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I can reassure the member opposite that the thing I can do to best reassure that member that we will not abandon the health care crisis is to declare to that member we will not follow his leader's advice.
The Honourable Member for Hants East.
Wait for the fourth question to be over.
Member Hants East.
Thank you, Mr.
member.
Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the conditional contract that's been awarded to Medic Delivery Services to treat biomedical waste in Mount Uniacke has a lot of residents concerned. They're concerned about the safety of the proposed plan, and they would like to have some more information. Last week in this House, I tabled a petition with 1,065 signatures of residents against this facility's placement in their community. A Halifax Regional Municipality report has said there's a risk contaminants could enter the water supply, and Mr. Speaker, I'll table that because I'll be referring to it again. So my question to the Minister of Health, will you release your department's assessment of Medic Delivery's proposal and outline the criteria used to grant the company its conditional approval?
Here, good.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'm not certain that I fully got the whole question from the honourable member, but what I can tell the House and Mr. Speaker is that the we're in a process. A conditional contract was awarded, and the conditions are that the proponent demonstrate their capacity to be able to deliver as indicated in the contract, and that means that they have to satisfy the environmental concerns, and part and parcel of those environmental concerns are the comments and the sign-off from the medical officers of health involved. That is part of the process, Mr. Speaker, and we will see how the process develops. It is in process, and I can assure all members that every step will be taken to ensure that the environmental issues are dealt with appropriately, and included within that, of course, are all medical related issues.
Member Hants East on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. About 300 people attended the community meeting held on this issue in Mount Uniacke 2 weeks ago. The biomedical treatment plant that plans to locate in Mount Uniacke is going to handle materials that many in the community feel are dangerous, Mr. Speaker. Residents here want to make sure that there's a proper evaluation done. So my question to the Minister of Environment is, HRM has indicated in that report that I tabled that their information report to Council that the facility will be subject to a Class 1 environmental assessment process. So can the Minister confirm that this will be the case if this project goes ahead?
Minister of Environment and Labour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And it's true that certainly there would be an environmental assessment of that project when the proponent brings information forward, and that hasn't happened at this point in time.
The honourable member for Hants East on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, the main issue here for the people is transparency. Residents feel that they are being kept in the dark, and they want to know more information about a plant that plans to treat biomedical waste in their community and any potential risks. So my question back to the Minister of Health is, will you meet with the concerned residents of Mount Uniacke as soon as possible?
The honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's my understanding, Mr. Speaker, that the area in question, that the proponent is indeed making available information to citizens as part of the planning process out there, that is available. The environmental assessment is part and parcel of that, and the comment from the medical officer of health is part and parcel to that. Mr. Speaker, everything that needs to be done is being done in terms of providing information to the citizens, and I will certainly monitor the situation to satisfy myself that they have had every opportunity to learn about this process.
The honourable member for Halifax Needham.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question through you is to the Minister of Health. Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotia has the second highest rate of skin cancer in the country, a cancer that by and large can be prevented. Although you'd never tell by the weather today, Mr. Speaker, Sun Awareness Week is coming, and the Canadian Cancer Society will be warning people that exposure to artificial tanning is just as dangerous as exposure to the sun. Governments are moving to better control exposure to artificial tanning devices, including regulations to protect youth and children under 18. So my question to the Minister of Health is, what plan do you have to protect Nova Scotians from skin cancer?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and as the honourable member correctly points out, today is not the best day in the world to be concerned about this, but the honourable member is indeed correct to point out that artificial devices are devices which, if not used appropriately, can potentially create problems for people, and that is something that it's necessary to make people aware of that and keep them aware of that, Mr. Speaker, and that is the objective of everyone involved.
Member for Halifax Needham on your first supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the New Brunswick government certainly understands the danger. It has a set of regulations controlling the operation of tanning parlors, including regulations that protect youth and children under the age of 18. So my question to the minister is, will you follow New Brunswick and protect young people from endangering their health in these tanning beds?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And what I can tell the honourable member and all members of the House, Mr. Speaker, is that we will certainly make sure that we're aware of what is being done in New Brunswick and give it very careful evaluation.
Honourable member for Halifax Needham on your final supplementary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Well, I'd like to table for the Honourable Minister the New Brunswick regulations. The World Health Organization recommends that nobody under the age of 18 use artificial tanning equipment. The Canadian Cancer Society and doctors who deal with this devastating disease really would like Nova Scotia to do the same. So I want to ask the Minister if he will act to prevent skin cancer in Nova Scotia by regulating artificial tanning salons, including a move to protect children and youth under 18.
Hear, hear.
Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. We're always very concerned about any dangers, especially youth may find themselves exposed to, and any steps that are being taken in other jurisdictions to assist in the prevention related to this issue is something that we will look at very carefully, Mr. Speaker, and if it's appropriate for us to take action further than is currently the case, then we will certainly want to give that very serious consideration.
You recognize the honourable member for Richmond.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the federal budget is getting closer to passing by today, but it's clearly not there yet. Mr. Speaker, the decision by Belinda Stronach to cross the floor to the Liberals was based on her belief that the budget was good for Canada and that her fear of a Stephen Harper separatist coalition. While Danny Williams has demanded that all Newfoundland and Labrador MPs support the budget and the Atlantic Accord, our Premier remains silent as we lose, as he has admitted, $1 million a week. My question is, why does the Premier continue to place the fate of the Atlantic Accord in Stephen Harper when even Belinda Stronach said today that he is not to be trusted?
The Honourable Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The member opposite would dearly love to have the focus of this House on Ottawa rather than the goings-on here in Halifax. What I can say, Mr. Speaker, is that this government has demonstrated and will continue to demonstrate that it will work with whatever government ends up in Ottawa, and we will work with that government effectively.
The honourable member for Richmond on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, $1 million a week. That's the leadership that we get from this Premier. $1 million a week being lost. Mr. Speaker, how ironic that is the gang of three Tory MPs from Nova Scotia, Peter MacKay, Gerald Keddy, and Bill Casey, that hold the fate of the Accord passing this Thursday. Mr. Speaker, while Nova Scotians are looking again for leadership on this issue from the Premier, his silence costs us $1 million per week. Mr. Speaker, we know that the budget vote and the future of the Atlantic Accord will be decided this Thursday, 2 days from now. So my question is, why won't the Premier stop rolling the dice on the Atlantic Accord and demand that the gang of three Tory MPs from Nova Scotia put Nova Scotia first and support the budget so we can enjoy those benefits today?
The Honourable Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And it's interesting, Mr. Speaker, there are mechanisms in Ottawa whereby the governing party can deliver money to the provinces. For example, we did sign a health agreement, and we are receiving the money. It was fast-tracked. We had an agreement on equalization. It was fast-tracked. There was an opportunity with the three national parties back early in April to support the Atlantic Accord, which, with about a 6-week delay from the passage of that, the other hurdles would be cleared and the check would be delivered. Mr. Speaker, had that offer been taken, we would have the $830 million check in our hand today.
Honourable member for Richmond on your final supplementary.
Well, you know, Mr. Speaker, Danny Williams is a Tory as well. And not once have we heard him chastising the federal government. What he has been doing is chastising his two Tory MPs and demanding that they put Newfoundlanders and Labradorians first and vote for the budget on Thursday. Now, Mr. Speaker, That's leadership, and that's a premier standing up for the people of his province. Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotians are expecting the same thing here in this province. Thursday is the day that we can have that $830 million, that check can be delivered to the Premier. So my question is the Premier's silence on this issue an admission that he is once again hoping to ride the coattails of Danny Williams' leadership on the Atlantic Accord?
Down with the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The members of the government, the members who sit on this side of the House, are extremely excited about the newfound enthusiasm of the member for Richmond for the Atlantic Accord. Where was that enthusiasm, Mr. Speaker, in 2001? Where was that enthusiasm in 2002? Where was that enthusiasm in 2003? He got enthusiastic, Mr. Speaker, after we signed the accord. Mr. Speaker, he's nothing but a Johnny-come-lately.
Now the member for Halifax Fairview. Now member for Halifax Fairview.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the minister responsible for the Gambling Corporation. Mr. Speaker, today we learned that a company called Great Canadian Gaming has entered into agreements to buy the Halifax and Sydney casinos. Starting today, Great Canadian will negotiate with the Nova Scotia Gambling Corporation for a revised operating agreement. Now, we all know that the current operating agreement is a bad Liberal deal that ever since it was signed has effectively shackled our ability to set our own course. My question to the minister, what instructions will the minister give the Gambling Corporation to ensure that this time we get a good deal?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And as the honourable member indicated, it is an agreement between two corporations as to acquire the assets of the casino and the issues here. Mr. Speaker, as the honourable member has clearly stated to this House, the agreement that was signed by the former government is moving on to that new corporation. What we have indicated to the Gaming Corporation is, in this spirit of cooperativism, as they work with the new company, to identify what we're doing with our gaming strategy and work in cooperation with them to bring benefits to Nova Scotia.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Fairview on your first supplementary.
Oh, Mr. Speaker, that minister can't get out of it that easily because this sale has to be approved by the Gambling Corporation. Mr. Speaker, it is ironic that the Liberal campaign against VLTs can't apply to the casinos because the bad Liberal deal basically exempts the casinos from any change in gambling laws. The bad deal has only been made worse, by the attitude of the current owners, Caesars Entertainment, which has ranged from hard-nosed intransigence to shoulder-shrugging indifference, Mr. Speaker. My question to the minister, what steps will the minister take to put control over casino gambling back in the hands of the people who own the casinos, the people of Nova Scotia?
Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And if his question was it a bad deal the former government made, I'll leave that for him to decide. Mr. Speaker, what we will attempt to do, Mr. Speaker, is to work with the new company, to work in cooperation with them, to look at the range so we can make the process and we can make this whole arrangement better for Nova Scotia.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Fairview on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today marks the beginning of negotiations between the Gambling Corporation and the new owners, Great Canadian Gaming. The new owners expect to complete the deal in 2 to 6 weeks. But the government's scope of action is limited by this bad Liberal deal because Great Canadian Gaming can just walk away if the new deal is too favourable to Nova Scotians. So my final question to the minister, what criteria will the Cabinet use when evaluating this new deal to make sure that the new deal is better and not worse?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And as the honourable member outlined, we have an opportunity now. We have an opportunity in front of us to work with the new corporation, the Great Canadian, to improve the situation for people in Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, the criteria that the Cabinet will use, they will use the criteria as what's good for Nova Scotians.
The honourable member for Dartmouth North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and my question is to the Minister of Health. Many low-income Nova Scotians with a disability or chronic illness rely on subsidized oxygen components of continuing care. This program provides stationary home oxygen equipment to their homes at a subsidized rate. However, these oxygen users are saying they cannot use the program to access portable oxygen tanks. My question to the Minister of Health: why is this present program limited to only stationary oxygen systems?
The honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I can tell the honourable member that that is a program that is currently under some review.
Member for Dartmouth North on your first supplementary.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. That's what I've heard before. I've heard that it was a matter of resources. Now it's currently under review. Hopefully, the minister will be able to respond to this second question. Mr. Speaker, for a person who must have oxygen 24 hours a day, a portable oxygen system is not a luxury. It is a necessity. Many elderly and disabled people who need this service feel trapped in their homes because they can't afford portable tanks. They have to budget their time away from home, rationing their portable oxygen, I should say, and if they can't afford it at all. I asked the minister, why would his department force home oxygen users to become prisoners in their own home?
The honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And as the honourable member knows, it's a very important part of our strategy with respect to individuals to try and keep them in their homes for as long as possible. And that is why the program that the honourable member is referencing is under review, Mr. Speaker, and we're always seeking ways to improve the situation of all citizens, Mr. Speaker, and that will be assessed as we move forward.
Member for Dartmouth North on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, this cannot come too soon, and I hope the minister realizes that he does need the resources to address this issue, because as we speak in this legislature each and every week, there is someone out there fundraising for a portable oxygen system. And Mr. Speaker, portable oxygen tanks aren't just about increased mobility. Most stationary oxygen systems require electricity, and having a portable system as a backup in long power outage is critical until the person can seek assistance. My final question to the Minister of Health is, why won't his department help low-income oxygen users with the cost of portable oxygen tanks now?
The honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And as I indicated to the honourable member, it is a matter that is being given consideration.
The honourable member for Preston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to Minister responsible for Office of Nova Scotia, African Nova Scotia Affairs and Municipal Affairs. Mr. Speaker, the Beachfield community is one of Nova Scotia's oldest black communities, and indeed one of the oldest black communities in Canada. The Beachfield Baptist Church has long and cherished history dating back to 1844. For generations, this community has used these lands for baptisms, to celebrate marriages, to worship, and to bury their loved ones. The lands surrounding the community are now under threat of development. My question to the minister is, what steps has he taken to ensure that the rights of this treasured community to worship will be protected from development?
The honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the question from the member opposite. What I will tell the member opposite and to all Nova Scotians is that in March, when we learned of the issue, I directed our staff, the executive director of our office, Wayne Hamilton, who is a former resident of Beachville, to facilitate a meeting with the community groups. Wayne did that on March 17th. We continue to work with the community groups and through Wayne to find a resolution. I understand this is a very serious issue in the community. I've personally visited the site myself, and I believe we need to find a resolution. I understand the concerns of the community with respect to this issue, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Preston on your first supplementary.
This community has touched the lives of many people throughout Nova Scotia and indeed North America. The community must be protected. Specifically, what are the minister's plan to protect this sacred land from development?
Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the question from the honourable member. As I said, without being requested by the community, I immediately directed our staff to facilitate a meeting. We will do what we can in the province of Nova Scotia to protect this community. I recognize the fact this is a community that has seen tremendous pressure from development, both commercial and residential, and the shape of this community is different than what it looked like a decade ago. We will do what is necessary to protect this community, Mr. Speaker, and we will continue to work towards a solution.
Member for Preston on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This whole issue is a much bigger issue. In the black community, a church is the heart and soul of the community and has been such since 1844. And it's very, very important that this is protected. It's the historic rights of the community to worship in peace. It's a matter of our Charter of Rights. Right. That we have the opportunity to worship in peace as we've done and our ancestors have done. And this is so important to this community. The minister promised action. It's just not enough. Will the minister table his plan to resolve this problem this week?
Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I again appreciate the question. As I indicated, I have actually visited the site. I have met with a number of residents there. I have instructed our staff to begin a process of facilitation. They held a general meeting in the community on March 17th. And as I've said in this House, we will do everything in our power to protect the interests of that community, Mr. Speaker. And that is our plan, and that is what we will do. Thank you.
The honourable member for Sackville-Cobequid.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Community Services. Earlier this year, a 72-unit affordable housing project was announced for Lower Sackville. The public outcry was swift and strong, Mr. Speaker. There had been no consultation, and the proposed project would have impacted on a waterway. 1 week after the announcement, the department withdrew the proposal, Mr. Speaker. So my question to the minister, why was this project announced without any community consultation?
Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member opposite for his question. Mr. Speaker, there is consultation with the city, the planners. They were aware of it. It was zoned for that purpose, and based on that, we made the announcement.
Member for Sackville-Cobequid on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the minister said with city planners and developers. What about the residents in the area, Mr. Speaker? Even the minister's colleague admitted in the media what the minister won't, that his department failed to do the homework. I'll table the article. In it, the Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations said, and I quote, "Whenever we are proposing these types of initiatives, it would be important, I think, to go out and talk to the community in advance." My question to the minister, why didn't his department do their homework in the first place instead of creating such an uproar in the community?
Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, most cities have some sort of municipal planning strategy. They do consultation with the community as to what sort of development they want in their community, and based on that, they put a plan in place. That was done by the city, and based on that plan, we move forward with the announcement.
I'll member Sackville-Cobequid on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, this is a provincial initiative program. The province should have to go out and speak to the residents in that area when they announce things like this. Mr. Speaker, so far under the federal provincial housing agreement, we have 2 canceled projects, 850 units instead of the 1,500 units we thought we'd have initially, and provincial funding that will do nothing but fade away in about 10 years, Mr. Speaker. The Nova Scotians who need affordable housing will be back to square one when agreements, many of them which the province already announced, dry up after 10 years. So I asked the minister, when is he going to show some leadership dealing with affordable housing, or get out of the way and let someone else do it?
Minister of Community Services.
Mr. Speaker, as I have indicated here before and in some detail in the estimates, that it is very clear that the best way to assist the lowest income Nova Scotians to obtain affordable housing, particularly for this particular affordable housing program, is by way of the rent supplement program. It has been acknowledged by independent think tanks that this is a more efficient way of doing it. In fact, sometimes they are suggesting that the differential is 37% effective if you're going out there and just building with bricks and mortar, in other words, more public housing units versus the rent supplement. We put this together. This is the approach that we're taking, And, Mr. Speaker, I would suggest that, in fact, the federal Liberal government is also now making this available to the provinces and territories as a way to implement the affordable housing program.
Now, member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Mr. Speaker, declining enrollment is a problem in every school board in Nova Scotia. Projections show that in the next 5 years there will be 11.8% fewer students in our public school system, and that equates to a total of 17,500 fewer students across Nova Scotia. Currently, the Department of Education reduces the dollars that are transferred to the school boards for teacher salaries based on their declining enrollments. That is, as each school board loses students, they're faced with a reduction in teachers as well. My question to the Minister of Education is, why is the government continuing to reduce the funding for teachers and forcing teacher layoffs when it's clear that the class sizes in higher grades are too high and course selection options are limited as a result?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not aware of teacher layoffs.
Now, member for Halifax Clayton Park on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my understanding, Mr. Speaker, that over 20 teachers will be laid off in the Annapolis Valley School Board this year. Some others may be added to the head office, but the actual classroom teachers are down. The difficulty in continuing to cut the funding for teachers is that the higher grades are suffering. School boards are left with no capacity to lower the class sizes in higher grades. In high school, for example, where we sometimes see classes of 50 students, high school principals in Halifax Regional School Board are unable to offer their students a full 24 credits in the 3 years of high school because they are funded for only 21 credits. So students are being forced to spend free periods in the library or in the cafeteria when they actually want to be in class. My question is, why is the department continuing the practice of reducing funds earmarked for teachers when it's clear that under the current system we don't have enough teachers at high school to offer full course loads?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, I met with the school boards on a couple of occasions. One of the things they talked about, and indeed, was sort of the new financial arrangements that happened when students were, when student population went down. And this year in our budget, Mr. Speaker, as you would know, is it had been really based on a reduction of sort of one teacher per 36 students, and it was reduced, I think, down to 25. And I remember corrected on that. But you know, Mr. Speaker, that member voted against the budget which contained that improved provision.
Now, member for Halifax Clayton Park on your final supplementary.
Go away.
Order, please. All member for Halifax Clayton Park on your final supplementary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'll choose to stick to the topic at hand, and that is the student-teacher ratios. Mr. Speaker, the Hogg report talks about a pupil-to-teacher ratio matrix, and he recommends developing that so that it could be used for funding of school teacher salary costs. Given that the Hogg, this is my question, Mr. Speaker, given that the Hogg report has recommended that a pupil-to-teacher ratio should be developed, why is the minister not moving now to establish those standards and ensure adequate pupil-to-teacher ratios?
Now, Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, as the honourable member will know and all members will know, that we did receive the Hogg report back the end of December. Currently, and if it hasn't started already, it will start in the next week or so. Staff, along with Mr. Hogg, is going out and will be meeting with the individual school boards to ascertain that the recommendations that will affect any particular board are appropriate ones in light of the information that Mr. Hogg analyzed.
Now, a member for Dartmouth North.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For weeks, silt has been running into Lake Micmac in Dartmouth. This is a serious situation that could have been prevented. For months, local residents and I have been calling for an environmental assessment to make sure the 118 interchange and the related development is done right. Halifax Regional Council plans to call on to the Minister of Environment and Labour to order an environmental assessment. My question to the Minister of Environment, how much longer will it take you for you to stop the development on this project and order an environmental assessment?
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank the member for the question. Certainly there has been some remediation work done on that site. There's been a third pond that's been installed. Those are the ponds where any of the runoff would filter through. We're content with the additional work that's been done, that there will no longer be any contamination of the lake.
The Honourable Member for Dartmouth North on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I think that's the third question that came through this House on this very issue, and the same thing has been consistently said. Mr. Speaker, the province and the federal government are now investigating this situation, yet much of the damage has already been done. We are told the runoff was caused by a combination of tree removal, grading on the site to get the land ready for the development, and heavy rain. Mr. Speaker, this situation could have been avoided. My question to the minister is, why wasn't your department protecting this lake from the start, and do you now recognize the need to change your procedure?
The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Labour.
Mr. Speaker, we certainly did, I guess, address some of the issues that came up, and hindsight's 20/20. If we could go back, there are things that we would do differently, but those remedies have been installed. There's additional mulch over the land that has been grubbed off or turfed off. There is an additional settling pond in unison with two others, so there are 3 settling ponds prior to any water being discharged, and there's additional work, fabric and hay bales that have been put around, which we feel will take care of any runoff in the future.
The Honourable Member for Dartmouth North on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to remind the Minister of Environment and Labour that this is a major watershed lake. Mr. Speaker, good planning makes sense. Protecting our urban lakes makes sense. Stopping development on the 118 interchange until a proper environmental assessment is done makes sense. My question to the minister is, will you, at the very least, meet with the concerned residents, councillors in the affected area, and MLAs as soon as possible to discuss what your department is going to do?
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have already agreed to meet with a group. I don't know if it's the same group that the honourable member is referring to, but I have agreed to meet with the group to look at that situation.
The honourable member for Cape Breton South.
Mr. Speaker, my question today is for the Minister of Community Services. Mr. Speaker, this government has been the beneficiary of 2 early childhood development and child care agreements courtesy of the federal government. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, the most recent agreement signed yesterday may be short-lived unless the Tory Gang of 3 in Ottawa start acting in the best interest of Nova Scotia instead of responding to the political opportunism of Stephen Harper. Mr. Speaker, the first agreement yielded some improvements to child care in our province, and my question to the minister, how often, Mr. Minister, or did the minister consult with the Roundtable on Daycare when he created child care initiatives under the first agreement signed with the federal government?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The first agreement, which is the early childhood development, was signed before I became minister, but with reference to the sector, I have created a table which meets on a regular basis. It includes both the nonprofit and the commercial child care operators in the province, and also urban and rural. And I must say that it's been an incredibly positive experience, and very much look forward to continuing to work with them.
The honourable member for Cape Breton South on your first supplementary.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, the short answer to that would have been no meetings with the Roundtable. Mr. Speaker, the obvious answer is none, because they have no meetings for the last 2 or 3 years. And now, as of 2 months ago, the last 2 terms of appointments for members of the Roundtable have expired. Mr. Speaker, the